big laughs, sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to We Need to Talk About on GB News with me, Alex Phillips, where we get stuck into the big issues that we must be looking at in depth. Keeping me company today is political journalist and commentator George Baginski, and here's what we've got coming up on the show. The UK will send more military aid to Ukraine, which has declared a state of emergency as it braces itself for Russian invasion. We'll get a live report direct from the front line and also ask what this means for us. Meanwhile, whatever happened to Partygate? Boris Johnson is now the first ever Prime Minister to have been questioned by police under caution. But what was once the red line for many has now been crossed. But against the backdrop of potential war in Europe, does any of it even matter anymore? And could this be the toughest university challenge of all? There's a proposal to limit the number of students by banning pupils who fail English and Maths GCSE. But is that fair? That's what we're talking about for the next hour, but what do you need to talk about? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or of course you can tweet us at GBNews. But first, it's time for the GB News headlines.
Good afternoon, it's just 1 minute past 2. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. Now, the Prime Minister has announced further military support for Ukraine. Boris Johnson told MPs, in the light of increasing threatening behaviour from Russia, the UK will send defensive weapons and non-lethal aid. Our security editor, Mark White, has the latest for us.
In the trenches overlooking Ukraine's rebel-held areas, soldiers say they've been coming under increased mortar fire. Another Ukrainian serviceman is reported to have been killed today and several more injured. It follows a funeral in Kiev for a soldier killed at the weekend. So far, the shelling is coming from rebel fighters. For the moment, at least, there is no sign of Russian troops. In the comments, the Prime Minister said it wasn't too late for Russia to pull back from the brink.
What we want to see, Mr. Speaker, is de-escalation by Vladimir Putin. There's still hope that he will see sense, but we are ready very rapidly to escalate our sanctions as I have set out.
In Moscow, even as his troops wait to cross into Ukraine, Vladimir Putin said he was still open to negotiation.
Our country stays open for direct and honest dialogue, for the search of diplomatic solutions for the most complex issues.
In rebel-held Donetsk, there are no signs of Russian tanks yet, but many locals say they'll welcome their arrival.
I think there will be radical changes in everything. Maybe peace can finally come. The shooting has stopped, and for us, this is the most important.
We'll pull through the economic adversities. We'll weather it by ourselves.
As Western governments begin implementing sanctions against Moscow, they warn any further Russian aggression will be met with even tougher measures. Mark White, GB News.
Of course, this is developing and we'll keep you up to date here on GB News. Now, in other news today, the Governor of the Bank of England says he sees a clear risk of inflation remaining at a high level. UK inflation hit a near 30-year high in January at 5.5%. Well, Andrew Bailey told the Parliament's Treasury Select Committee the Bank of England anticipates a peak at nearly 7.25% in April when a rise in the energy cap comes into effect. The Deputy Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police has asked the Home Secretary for a review into how the resignation of the Commissioner was handled. Giving evidence to the London Assembly Police and Crime Committee, Stephen House claims that due process had not been followed and says he's deeply disappointed. Dame Cressida Dick resigned earlier this month. Mistakes, waste and fraud that led to billions of pounds of COVID loan support being lost has been described as unacceptable. That's the analysis of the chair of the Public Accounts Committee, Meg Hillier. Previous official figures estimate up to £21 billion worth of COVID loans to business is unlikely to be recouped. The Treasury rejects the claims made by the committee. A man who stalked the British tennis star Emma Raducanu has been handed a 5-year restraining order. Bromley Magistrates Court heard that 35-year-old Amrit Magar turned up to the teenager's home multiple times, leaving gifts on her porch and taking her father's shoe. It was also heard that 19-year-old Miss Raducanu no longer feels safe in her own home. Students could be blocked from taking out student loans at university if they fail their maths and their English GCSEs. It's under new government proposals to tighten control on higher education. The plans, which will be published later this week, introduce controls on student numbers and minimum entry requirements for some university applicants. Staffordshire Police have renewed their appeal for help to find a woman who's been missing since Saturday. CCTV footage shows 19-year-old Emmy Robson was last seen in Weston-in-Crewe at roughly 7 p.m. She was seen wearing a red hoodie, black jogging bottoms and black trainers. Heathrow Airport has recorded its lowest annual passenger numbers for nearly 50 years. Britain's biggest airport says numbers fell to under 20 million last year. That's the lowest since 1972. They say that although numbers are behind forecast, they expect a strong summer for tourism. Strong winds and heavy snow will hit the UK this week as the nation faces continued warnings about significant flooding. It comes after 3 storms battered the UK within a week, causing the River Severn's water levels to rise and flooding parts of the Midlands. The Environment Agency's issued 2 severe flood warnings near the River Severn, where levels could overtop the defences. Wildfires are going to increase around the planet, even in areas previously not prone to fire, like the Amazon. It's according to new research from the UN Environment Programme. They conclude climate change is expected to increase the number of extreme wildfires by 50% within the next 28 years. You're now up to date here on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now, let's head to Alex for We Need to Talk About.
Ukraine has now declared a state of emergency across the entire country as fears over an imminent full-scale invasion mount. Kiev has also called up army reservists and warned all citizens in Russia to leave immediately. The picture is bleak. With armed forces dwarfed by Russian military might, Putin has also warned he has unparalleled hypersonic weapons ready for a devastating assault, as America orders US troops, jets and helicopters to Eastern Europe. In chilling echoes of the Cuban Missile Crisis, experts warn that the involvement of nuclear weaponry could rapidly escalate into a continental crisis, the likes of which have not been seen since the Second World War. Well, joining me now on the show is reporter at the newspaper Extra Bladet, Emil Filtenborg. He is currently in eastern Ukraine. Emil, what is the situation like there on the ground right now?
Well, it's very tense right now. Luckily, I'm far away from the shellings right now, about 40 kilometers. But we went to visit some of the properties that got destroyed yesterday by the shellings. Found the people living there, talked to them. They had their whole lives ruined by war. Basically, he had lost his wife in 2016, and now he had also lost his windows. And I mean, they're very afraid, obviously. Not long after that, we decided to that we had to get out of the city, and we started hearing Grad rockets. We believe it's Grad rockets in the distance, And as we left the city, I saw on Twitter another Danish correspondent who wrote that she was in the same city as I was, and they were now firing on all cylinders on the ground rocket systems at Shastir, the city I was in. So in this little interview bit we showed before the show, there's an old lady saying that that the shooting has stopped, and that is definitely not the case on the Ukrainian side of the border.
Do we have any idea who is behind the shooting and the shelling right now, or is it a case of they're both sides firing? What's the landscape like of who's potentially culpable?
Well, both sides are likely firing. I think by the looks of it, obviously the damages we saw today and the damages done to the power plant near the city I was in was done by the separatist side, and from the other side it couldn't be done any other way. Not that I think. A lot of the damages have been confirmed are due to separatist shellings, but we also know that the Ukrainians will respond to fire when they absolutely have to, although they have been given very strict orders to take care right now, because as many people know, Putin is looking for some kind of reason, some kind of casus belli to attack Ukraine. Is the fear. Many Western leaders fear that he's looking for an excuse for an attack, and so the Ukrainian army has been warned not to give him that.
I mean, President Putin has been talking up his nuclear payload. He's been bragging about having hypersonic missiles. I understand you've been actually looking at Ukraine's preparedness to deal with war, including looking at bunkers and bomb shelters to protect people, and you found them wanting. Yeah.
Well, the bunkers don't win wars, naturally, and the Ukrainian army is in very good shape. It's much better shape now than it was in 2014. We shouldn't necessarily underestimate the Ukrainian army, but also we shouldn't underestimate the Russian army, and the Russian military in general is seen as having is much larger and has a much larger air force, which is really going to be the worrying part of this. If they attack, it is from the people. Now, I'm not a military expert, but if they attack from the people I've spoken to, it will be an expensive war for Russia, especially in the long run, but it's not impossible for Russia. We have seen some preparedness, like we've seen some troop movements today on the Ukrainian side. We've seen some armored vehicles being moved further east, and some seemed like some companies being moved further east. But the big question is this air superiority and these missiles, like how big a difference are they going to make on the battlefield? And many on the Ukrainian side, feel like or believe that these are gonna make it very, very hard for the Ukrainians to resist should Russia attack.
Yeah, I mean, there have been reports, certainly from America, that Vladimir Putin's been importing supplies of blood, which has led Joe Biden to speculating that you don't do that unless you're preparing for a pretty gnarly war. Has there been an exodus of citizens from the east now as tensions continue to ramp up there?
Not that I have noticed, but we also have to remember that the social problems in these areas are rampant. Many of the people who had the means to leave left already in 2014, 2015. A lot of the people who are left now are unemployed or pensioners, and the pension is not very, very high in this country. It's around, I'd say, £50, maybe £60. Many of these people simply do not have the means to leave, even if they wanted to. We are starting to see people leave, people planning to leave, but those are for the well-off people. There are no mass exodus, no refugees to speak of, not on a large scale, not that we have seen, and we have been.
Emil, thank you ever so much. Thank you so much, and thank you for your fantastic reporting, bringing us the breaking situation as it happens there in Ukraine. You stay safe, and let's catch up again very soon. Emil Filtenborg there for us in eastern Ukraine, right on the front line. Well, joining me now is Major General Chip Chapman, a former head of counter-terrorism at the MOD and senior British military advisor at US Central Command. Chip, fantastic to have you on the programme. I mean, the conversation now is that people are beginning to think that Putin is preparing for full-scale invasion. What's your interpretation of that, and what does that mean?
Well, I think at the moment we're at what we call stage zero, and the Russians are really framing this in their own way for just war. And you can see that in three ways. The first one is they're trying to suggest that they've got legitimate authority. It's not an invasion. We've been invited in. The second one is just cause. We're going in there to prevent genocide. And the third one is right intention. You know, we are there merely as peacekeepers. Now, that, of course, is absolutely wrong because it's a violation of international law, Ukrainian sovereignty, and rescinding really the Minsk agreements, which froze the conflict in 2015. Now, if this was the end of it, they would remove the 180, 190,000 people that they've got arrayed along the border in Belarus and Ukraine, and they're not. So the first thing is they are still there as a tool of coercive diplomacy. It's talk or concede, or these troops may do something, they may invade. The next step they could go to is what you would call seize and withhold, seize the stuff on the left bank of the Niger River in eastern Ukraine, and then say, we've taken that, we'll take Kiev and the rest of the country unless you concede now, because all wars are ultimately fought for political means. And the last one, of course, is the sort of shock and withhold, or when they'll go and try and take over the whole country. And I think your previous correspondent is right. If they do that, the first thing you do in modern warfare is control of the air and control of the maritime environment. So they will seek to have air superiority and would therefore need to negate the strength, whatever it may be, of the Ukrainian Air Force. And that will be preceded probably by cyber attacks to bring that shock and surprise, which will enable the armed troops, the armoured formations, to try and get to Kiev as quickly as possible. Now, one thing at the moment, Ukraine's favour, heats the mud of spring. You wouldn't want to be the Met man suggesting what the right date would be for Putin.
And, I mean, Putin hasn't been shy about parading his nuclear arsenal, amongst other things, leading some people to suggest that this could become as critical as the Cuban Missile Crisis. We've just heard today that the UK is sending more defence weaponry to Ukraine. Do you think this has the potential to escalate into something that isn't just between Russia and Ukraine, but far wider and, frankly, far scarier?
I don't think it does. This isn't framed in that way by Putin. And really, if you look what he said 2 days ago, this is really to do with his thought that there really isn't an independent Ukraine. And you see that in his strategic objectives. You know, he said for 20 odd years he wants to regain lost territory and spheres of influence. If he was going to try and drag in the West, he might try and do things like use cyber capability against the Western powers to sort of disable power stations and things like that. But why would he want to escalate against the West and NATO when the the European NATO outspends Russia, and the addition of America means that he really would get absolutely strategically stuffed should that happen? So he wants to try and make sure that he deters NATO and we deter him, and that's why we've had this enhanced forward presence for the last 6 years, since we went from a reassurance policy to a deterrence policy following the Warsaw Summit of 2016, because he unmasked what he was going to do in 2008 in Georgia, and 2014 was his initial annexation of Crimea, and then the actions in the Donbass. So we know what he's up to now. So I don't think he'll escalate. I think the talk of nuclear weapons also is sort of pretty farcical and is a sort of, again, a tool of coercive diplomacy. Mutually assured destruction and extended deterrence and minimum deterrence mean that that probably is not going to come to anything, but it plays into this fear factor that people have, same as terrorism, same with war. You know, people fear nuclear weapons, but of course the opprobrium that you would have by using it for the first time since 1945 would make you a pariah forevermore.
Yeah, Major General Chip Chapman, thank you so much for coming on and contributing your deep insight into this as tensions continue to mount. Well, joining me in the studio today is political journalist and commentator George Baginski. Now, we heard Major General Chip Chapman there talking about the Donbass, and we know that Putin has declared independence to breakaway states in the east of Ukraine. Can you explain a little bit more about the geopolitics of that situation?
Yes, absolutely. So, first of all, it is not entirely clear which regions could be occupied by Russia officially. We need to use the correct terminology to begin with. These are temporarily occupied territories of Donetsk and Lugansk. These are areas that belonged to Ukraine. There are some areas that are are ruled by Russian separatists, and they're mostly Russian-speaking population. Many of those people really feel that, or maybe have sympathies towards Russia. Nonetheless, that's part of Ukraine. Now, if Putin sends his army, and he will be doing it right now, to those areas, it can expand further because it's only a small part of Donbass that's controlled by the separatists. But where is the line? He will be pushing as far as possible to take as much as possible. And as I've said on your show last time, he may even want to control the whole Sea of Azov and connect to Crimea, because at the moment, Crimea is sort of separate from Russia. There is a bridge built, but it's not necessarily that good from the Russian perspective. So they may be moving further and further until they meet a real resistance. And I think this is why it is crucial to be supporting Ukraine as much as possible at the moment. Russian technology is much more advanced, but Ukraine has a huge army. What they need is anti-drone sniper rifles. They need anti-tank missiles, such as the Javelins. There is a lot of equipment that they are lacking and they are in need of, and that would make it very costly for Putin to keep on pushing. I sort of feel that our response from the West was too slow and too weak. Some countries, such as the UK, of course, were right there when Ukraine needed them. But Germany and others were a little bit weak on that. We need solidarity now, and we need to show Mr. Putin that he is not invited to those areas. But even just a few weeks ago, Alex, you will remember, President Biden said that if there would be a minor incursion into Ukraine, perhaps the West would be mute. What did that mean? Maybe that was just an invitation for the Russians to think that taking over those two areas is acceptable. We need more sanctions than just a couple of oligarchs. We need real strategy and real red lines for Russia to understand that there needs to be a stability in that region and not what's happening.
George, thank you very much. You're with GB News on TV and DAB radio. It's time now for a short break and a check on the weather forecast. Back soon.
Hello again. The winds are picking up once more today. For most of us, not going to cause too many issues, but we do have a yellow warning across parts of northeast England and southeast Scotland, where we're going to see some lively gusts, and another warning for snow. More on that in a moment. Going to turn colder everywhere as this cold front sweeps across the country, but it's only really across Scotland and Northern Ireland today. This little kink in the isobar suggesting here we could see some very strong winds for a time over northeast England and southeast Scotland. So we do have a Met Office yellow warning in place. There's that weather front bringing heavy rain for most of the day across parts of central Scotland and Northern Ireland, turning to snow across the northwest. For most of England and Wales, it's a dry, fine day. Some sunny spells and still pretty mild, but the winds are steadily increasing. And then, as we go through the evening, the rain will push southwards and we'll see more snow showers coming into western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Quite concerned about the amount of snow building up in some locations. It's going to be hit and miss, but then through the central belt, even into parts of southeast Scotland, we could easily see some snow building up through the night. The rain will work its way southwards, keeping the temperatures up here, but the colder air is arriving for many, and temperatures will be down close to or below freezing to start Thursday. More snow showers packing in through the day across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Another Met Office yellow warning in place here. Several centimetres building up, maybe as much as 20 or 30 over the hills in western Scotland. For England and Wales, we start with rain across the southeast. That clears away. It turns brighter with sunny spells, but even here some wintry showers likely over northern England and North Wales by the afternoon, and more windy weather coming into Northern Ireland during Thursday evening. More perhaps tending to rain at this stage at low levels, but still some snow coming in over the hills. That should all, though, clear out of the way by Friday, and Friday looks like starting cold and frosty, but then for many, a calm and sunny day to come. Goodbye.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. You're with Alex Phillips on GB News. As world leaders react to Russian aggression and mounting conflict in Ukraine, what will be the impact over here? To navigate us through the latest developments, I'm joined by political correspondent Tom Harwood, live in Westminster, economics editor Liam Halligan, security editor Mark White, and foreign affairs commentator George Baginski. Tom, I'm going to start off with you. I mean, we've just had a Prime Minister's question. Boris has announced more weaponry to be sent to Ukraine, but there's been a big backlash against what is perceived to be fairly weak sanctions against Russia so far. What is the latest?
There has indeed. Now, I think the first thing to say in this conversation is broadly the whole House is in agreement. Aside from one or two eccentrics, people think that the government is doing the right thing. And it was notable that the Labour Party leader, Keir Starmer, was emphasising how much he was supporting the government throughout their exchanges. However, there were differences in nuance. When it came to the detail, the Labour Party leader wanted the Prime Minister to go further, faster. Indeed, it must be said that many Conservative backbenchers are of that opinion as well. I have to say that we needed a bit of clarification after the event as to whether Sir Keir Starmer supports the international Western view of an iterative process, of the idea that we start with a few sanctions now and hold more sanctions in reserve for if the invasion becomes more full scale, if Russia incurs further upon sovereign Ukrainian territory. Now, the Labour Party spokesman clarified to us that the Labour Party does support an iterative process, does support holding more sanctions in reserve, but believes that the first tranche of those sanctions should be wider in scope. And we heard a bit about what the Labour Party is demanding, cutting Russia out from the SWIFT international payment system, and indeed action on Russia Today, the broadcaster. Well, we did hear some action on Russia Today. The Culture Secretary Secretary sending a letter to Ofcom asking to review their broadcasting licence. So certainly some movement here, but I have to say the overriding impression from that exchange today, aside from some quibbles over party funding, aside from the particulars of what is done when, broad agreement on this international strategy.
Tom, thank you very much. Now, Liam, I'm going to come to you because while there have been criticisms of perhaps the sanctions package not being as strong as it could be, how much of that is potentially down to self-harm limitation, given the UK's exposure when we've got inflation, which will be driven up, no doubt, by a conflict in Europe, the cost of energy going up? What is going to be the economic impact?
Of course, Western leaders want to be seen to be imposing sanctions on Vladimir Putin's Russia, given the escalation of this military conflict. And yet they will, as you rightly say, Alex, have an eye on the implications for voters at home. We are in the middle of a cost of living crisis. Wholesale gas prices have gone up for the last 3 days in a row as these tensions have burst through. That, of course, means higher fuel bills, higher electricity bills. We generate 40% of our electricity in this country from gas-driving turbines, and oil prices too. Oil's now pushing $100 a barrel. The RAC's warning of record high petrol and diesel prices, and they're already at a record high. They could go even higher. Plus, of course, as we've discussed, Russia is a major food exporter, a major exporter of fertilizer. All these basic commodities that if the prices of them go up, if the Russians respond to sanctions by putting on some trade restrictions of their own, that will hit people hard in their wallets and purses at a time when the cost of living is already spiralling.
Liam, thank you. Now, Mark, this landscape is changing by the second. We're hearing fresh reports all the time with notifications of further incursions, reports of false flag events. What is the latest when it comes to the global reaction to this situation?
Well, I think it's a wait and see in terms of whether Vladimir Putin has actually ordered those troops to move in. There were on Monday night some pictures that emerged that purported to show tanks heading towards Donetsk, that city in the Donetsk region, Luhansk being the other one that have been recognised as breakaway rebel republics by Vladimir Putin. But those vehicles have never been seen since, despite the fact that the media is everywhere in that location. And indeed, Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, said this morning that the picture on the ground is confused. They don't think that if there have been moves, there have been no significant moves by Vladimir Putin to put Russian troops in there. So we wait to see. And certainly in the speeches that he has been giving at the Kremlin in the last 2 days, he says that he reserves the right, given the situation on the ground, to put those troops in. So that would seem to indicate that he hasn't actually moved them as such. So we wait and see. And in the meantime, of course, it is very tense. There is continuing shelling in the trenches there on the border of this disputed region. We get reports again, reports coming through today of another Ukrainian soldier killed and several more who were injured. That follows 3 Ukrainian soldiers who were killed over the weekend in shelling.
Mark, thank you very much. And coming back to you, George, it seems to me that as tensions continue to mount, it's almost as if leaders are locked in a cat and mouse game. What will Putin do next? You know, moving incrementally. We've had today the presidents of Poland and Lithuania asking that the EU grant Ukraine candidate status. And there are people out there who have criticised that, saying that this will potentially only provoke Vladimir Putin.
We should not think what would provoke Vladimir Putin. Ukraine is an independent country, and if they want to join NATO or even join the EU, which doesn't guarantee them more safety, but if they want to be part of that club, they are allowed to. We should stop being afraid also of putting on sanctions. I've heard this argument that it will also hit back and attack British businesses. Of course, to some extent it will be, but if we don't put sanctions on Russia at the moment, and there is a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, then the prices of food will go up. Ukraine is one of the major agricultural powers in the world. If their country will be in a huge conflict, then anything can happen. It would also affect British people because the prices will go up. So I also spoke to Ukrainian diplomats just an hour before this show, and I told them, are the Russians possibly, can they move into the areas of Donetsk and Lugansk, not just those areas that are controlled by the separatists? And I've received a thrilling reply. He just told me all scenarios are on the table. So we need a much fiercer resistance to the Russian invasion.
Tom, Liam, Mark, George, thank you ever so much for your extremely valuable analysis as we continue to track this emerging news story. You're with GB News on TV and DAB Radio. Coming up, we'll be talking Partygate and how Boris Johnson has become the first Prime Minister ever to be questioned under police caution. But now it's time for a check on the news headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 2:34. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. The Prime Minister has announced further military support for Ukraine. Boris Johnson told MPs, in the light of increasing threatening behaviour from Russia, the UK will send defensive weapons and non-lethal aid. It says Ukraine's top security official declared a state of emergency in the country. This morning, ahead of laying a wreath at the Kremlin wall, Vladimir Putin says Moscow is still ready to look for diplomatic solutions with the West. Mistakes, waste and fraud that led to billions of pounds of COVID loan support being lost has been described as unacceptable. That's the analysis of the chair of the Public Accounts Committee, Meg Hillier. Previous official figures estimate up to £21 billion worth of COVID loans to businesses is unlikely to be recouped. The Treasury rejects the claims made by the committee. The Deputy Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police has asked the Home Secretary for a review into how the resignation of the Commissioner was handled. Giving evidence to the London Assembly Police and Crime Committee, Stephen House claims that due process had not been followed and that he's deeply disappointed. Dame Cressida Dick resigned earlier this month. Staffordshire Police have renewed their appeal for help to find a woman who's been missing since Saturday evening. CCTV footage shows 19-year-old Emmy Robson last in Weston Crewe at roughly 7 p.m, wearing a red hoodie, black jogging bottoms and black trainers. Wildfires will increase around the planet, even in areas previously not prone to fire, like the Amazon. That's according to new research from the UN Environment Programme. They concluded climate change is expected to increase the number of extreme wildfires by 50% within the next 28 years. You're now up to date here on GB News, but on your TV, online and DAB Plus radio. Shortly, we'll be back to Alex for We Need to Talk About.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube. You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention, when questioned, something which you later rely on in court. A line made famous by every single cop drama and known to anybody who has had a significant brush with the law. A line that 2 weeks ago could have seen the Prime Minister forced from office. Now, against the backdrop of a terrifying escalation towards war in Europe, the fact that Boris Johnson has become the first ever Prime Minister to be interviewed under caution has barely made a flicker of a headline beyond ITV, which obtained a copy of the Met Police Partygate questionnaire. Yet mere moments ago, commentators, critics and even colleagues regarded this to be a red line. Well, joining me now is Peter Edwards, a former editor of Labour List. Peter, fantastic to have you on the show. Is this something that you think the opposition benches are going to continue to push on, or as we're now amidst a big crisis, is it time to just let this go?
No, it's not time to let it go at all. Boris Johnson is accused of breaking the rules, and sadly, the dispute in Ukraine is going to be with us for many months. But so is this matter as well, and the public want closure. They want to know who broke the rules. And I think if Boris Johnson gets a fixed penalty notice, Labour will push him to resign, but so will his own party.
I mean, is the risk not here that what is so important right now is to see harmony and unity with a united front from the West against Vladimir Putin and his ongoing aggressions? And actually, the UK has very much led the way when there has been floundering from EU member states on how to handle the crisis mounting in Ukraine. Arguably, the Prime Minister has been very strong on this with an emerging transatlantic alliance. Would not to resurrect Partygate and point out that Boris Johnson hasn't managed to traverse these obstacles yet actually be doing a major disservice to a united effort? At the same time, you've got a tyrant about to invade his neighbour.
Not at all, no. So democratic accountability doesn't go away when you're in a conflict. I won't use the word war because Britain's not involved in it, but clearly we're taking non-military action. Democratic accountability doesn't go away then, and nor do police investigations. This is not just a Westminster storm, perhaps of the like we might read about in occasional newspaper gossip columns. It's an allegation of law breaking involving the most senior politician and some of the most senior officials in the land. None of that should take away from the fact that Britain and to a certain extent Europe is united in holding Vladimir Putin to account over his wicked actions in Ukraine. But these things shouldn't be seen in contradiction. Democratic accountability at home is more important than ever when there's so many external tensions. We have to show Britain upholds standards.
We as a nation spent weeks obsessing over this. Every single line of every single copy, every single minute of broadcast was about will he, won't he, are there going to be enough letters handed to Sir Graham Brady? But it's gone very quiet at the moment, even from opposition benches, probably for a reason. Would it be your projection that perhaps opposition parties are lying in wait, and the minute the news agenda quietens down again and the focus is no longer on foreign affairs, that they will be back at the Prime Minister's throat?
I wouldn't put it quite like that. That might come across as a bit superficial, and I know that's not your view. You're just asking a question, of course. But I think there was this frenzy, as you rightly said. That's died down. There was perhaps two simple reasons. People were waiting for Sue Gray's report. That came out in a heavily reduced and edited format initially. The police inquiry is ongoing, and slightly prosaically, MPs are on recess. So it's a bit different when you have 600 gossipy MPs in one building every day, hanging out in the coffee shops and the bars. They were in recess the other week, and that's changed the dynamic. And then we have these awful events in Eastern Europe at the same time. But make no mistake, this will come back because the police will finish their inquiries. It looks like they may issue some explanatory notices. We don't know to whom. But then remember, you could have events very quickly snowballing in Ukraine, snowballing in terms of the Partygate investigation, and then the local elections at the start of May are barely 2 months away. So the pace of events could be very difficult internationally and domestically for the Prime Minister. So I think it's a lot more than just a quick feeding frenzy in the newspapers.
Now, legal experts who have had sight of this questionnaire have criticised it as essentially being too basic, too easy, too vulnerable perhaps to being able to be easily boxed off with the advice of a good lawyer. Is that something that you agree with?
No, I'm not sure I do, actually. I think there is a virtue in simplicity in this type of things, really. And I think the more, whether you're dealing with the police or a regulator, the more complex the inquiry is, the more it might be easier to deflect and divert, and you've got obfuscation. And of course, that's something that Boris Johnson, who's got this amazing command of English, despite the other things we don't like, his amazing command of English and Latin, he would be very good at deflection. So I think a very simple, pared down questionnaire, a bit like a police interview. This was not the same, of course, it wasn't an interview, but a bit like a police interview is actually really helpful, because lots of these matters can be dealt with yes or no, truthful answers or not truthful answers. Were you there? Were you not there?
Peter, thank you ever so much. That's Peter Edwards, who's a former editor of Labour List. Now, I really want to know what you, our viewers, think about this, because a few weeks ago, it was a mixed bag. A lot of you were emailing in going, Boris has to go. This is beyond the pale. A few of you obviously defending him and saying any criticism of our Prime Minister was Boris bashing. But in the current context of what is going on in Ukraine, is it time we just all moved on from Partygate? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet me @gbnews so I know what you, the nation, really thinks. Now, George, I want to know what you really think about this. All of a sudden, it seems farcical and trivial, doesn't it, in the context of this crisis going on in Europe?
It does seem trivial at the moment, but we should not move on. We need public disclosure. We need accountability. We need to know what our leaders do or they don't do. If they break the law, they need to be treated just as any other citizen. We need equality. I think people of Britain need to feel that whether they broke the law or if the Prime Minister broke the law, everybody can be punished exactly the same way. Saying that, we need to consider also that China doesn't care whether Mr. Xi Jinping went to a party or not. Russia does not care whether Mr. Putin went to a party or not. They're focused on becoming the major global powers and, perhaps one could argue, defeating the West. If we will be boggled with trivial issues such as this, although it is not a trivial issue, but if we will be focused too much on discussing, whether somebody had a drink or not, broke the law or not, whether the pronouns of this general are correct or not, we are risking being a laughing stock. And while we will focus on all these issues, the others will simply take over another part of Ukraine, another part of of a sea here and there. We need to look at the bigger picture at the moment, I think.
Yeah, George. Now I'm going to go to Claire Pearsall now, who is a Conservative commentator and counsellor. Now, Claire, what do you think on this situation? I mean, is this just giving fodder to Vladimir Putin? We know he has cyber farms around Russia, which is used to sow discord, discontent and division in other countries with bots and so on and so forth. Would this essentially be succor to a tyrant if we resurrect Partygate? It seems to me, as we don't have Claire yet, so we'll just wait for Claire to join us. So I'm going to turn back to you, George. I mean, it does seem to me that knowing that Putin likes to play out theatre when it comes to his handling of foreign affairs and geopolitics, that this is something that he could potentially pounce on once again and point at Boris Johnson as being a rather feckless, reckless and hapless leader.
Oh, absolutely. There is already a war going on in the media and in the cyber world. We just maybe don't necessarily see it, but every single weak point of the West is being used by the others to mock our neighbors, to laugh at them. We really need to look at the grand issue. And the issue is that, for example, now there is a European country, an independent country, that has Russian tanks moving in. Before, we used to even have some referendums. There was a sort of a mock referendum in Crimea. Now nobody even speaks about referendums. They're just tanks here and there. And yet we are discussing some other issues. I think we really need to switch on something in our heads and to realize that there are much more serious issues happening around the world that will affect us all, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem to me that, I mean, a while ago I was one banging the drum saying it seems unconscionable to have a Prime Minister who has been accused of breaking the law. If we cast our minds back to 2007 when Tony Blair was interviewed by the police over a cash for honours scandal, he said at the time, if I am interviewed under police caution and therefore I'm alleged with committing a criminal offence, that would make me untenable and I would step down. Boris Johnson seems to have no intention of doing that.
I think that even if Boris Johnson would be punished with a penalty notice that he introduced to the UK himself, so it would affect him like anybody else, it would be shameful for him. It would be embarrassing for him and the government, but he should not be resigning. There are much more important issues happening around the world now. UK is going through Brexit. This is very crucial that those trade deals are signed that will have an impact on dozens of years, on generations to the future. We need stable government now more than ever, and we need to put pressure on our leaders. They cannot be outside of the law. This is what actually does happen in authoritarian countries. We are different. We in the West believe in freedom. We believe in democratic accountability, but we should also look at the bigger picture, as I said before, and know that the other guys are they're playing a bit of a more serious game right now, and there's no time for jokes anymore.
Yeah, no time for jokes indeed. Thank you very much. We were going to try and get to the Conservative perspective of that from Claire Pearsall, but we were unfortunately unable to connect at the last moment. Now, proposals to introduce minimum entry grades for universities and a cap on student numbers have received backlash from critics, calling the measures discriminatory. As part of a government shake-up of post-18 education, students will soon need GCSE passes in English and Maths or 2 grade E's at A-level. Currently, a third of pupils fail to get grade 4s in those 2 core subjects, which are equivalent to a grade C in old currency. The intention is to actually cut back on students forking out for university degrees that do not translate into better job prospects and encourage more young people to take up apprenticeships or alternative further education training. But should the government be cracking down on the universities themselves for offering Mickey Mouse courses at the highest rate of tuition fees rather than penalise students struggling to get their grades? We're joined now by education consultant Tony Breslin, who is a former principal and chief examiner at A-level and GCSE. Tony, there's a really sort of mixed bag of opinions on this one. There are people saying, well, look, if you're not able to pass GCSE Maths and GCSE English, then what are you doing thinking of getting a university degree in the first place? Maybe your destiny is something less academic. And then there are other people saying, well, look, hold on. Maybe you didn't get those grades for various reasons. It might be your background, it might be disruption, it might be a brilliant scientist and dyslexic, or a brilliant linguist and just not very good at maths. What's your position on this?
I'm closer to your second position than your first. It seems to me that this plays into a broader narrative that has run for many years, which I think we could only have in this country, which is this idea that somehow there are too many young people going to university. And most of those who utter that narrative, they've been to university, their children are going to university, and their parents went to university. If we're serious about improving education, we need as many people, as many young people pursuing their potential as far as they can. And what we know about examination results is that they're incredibly socially patterned in terms of your background, the school you've attended, and all sorts of other factors. And that means that children of high ability from poorer backgrounds often don't achieve the grades that they deserve. So in effect, the worry is that this will discriminate, this will narrow participation in higher education. And it will mean that we have fewer bright young people going into education. And I think, frankly, to tie it to student loan access is really going to accentuate that, because, of course, the young people who depend most on loans and financial support are those, again, from disadvantaged backgrounds. So I think this is wrong-headed at every level. What we ought to be asking is, how do we enhance pre-university education? How do we enhance time in the sixth form? How do we invest in these young people so that whatever their background, they achieve their potential? Because otherwise, we're simply shutting the door. And we're going back to a situation When I was, applying to university, I went to a school in Brent, northwest London, which I'm working with again now, which is fantastic, Newman Catholic College. But back then, hardly any of us achieved great academic things. I think 2 from my year group went to university. Do we want to go back to that? I think we want to go forward to a place where young people achieve their potential, both in professional education and in academic education. This isn't the way to do it.
But Tony, could there be an argument that perhaps the government should go after certain universities who might be offering courses that might be better suited to diplomas or apprenticeships, and students taking these courses are amassing debts after over £9,000 a year student loans?
I think we need to separate the two issues. I mean, certainly what we are very inclined to do in this country, and you've referred to it in your own intro, we're inclined to refer to new and often innovative courses as Mickey Mouse. I think Mickey Mouse gets a bad press on this. And we tend constantly to refer to the vocational routes, the apprenticeship routes, as not as being of the same status. And that's deep in our culture. And my concern is that, if you could show me statistics that said children from whatever their ability were as likely to go into apprenticeships, whatever their class background, I would fully support that every day of the week. But we know that increased access to vocational education, I prefer to call it professional education, it is actually what you get is children from poorer backgrounds are steered into those tracks. And what we've got to do is take a serious look about what we value and what we don't value. We've got to make sure that our professional education is as attractive to middle-class parents and middle-class students as academic courses. At the moment, too many young people who end up on a vocational track are there because they've sort of fallen off the academic track. Well, this is a model to frankly push more young people off that track, and this will discriminate against young people from disadvantaged backgrounds and poorer backgrounds and from non-traditional backgrounds.
Tony, thank you ever so much. Now, George, what are your views on this?
I studied in London, for which I'm enormously grateful, but I think we need to end this obsession that everybody has to go to a university, and if you wouldn't go, if you don't have your bachelorate, if you don't have your master's, you should be excluded from the society, or you will not get jobs that are as good. It's clearly not the case anymore in the world. When we really look at, for example, the IT sector, Elon Musk was asked in an interview recently, would he prefer to hire somebody with the perfect skills for the job or the person with the best grades from a top university? He said he would hire the first one because it's the skills. We're pushing a lot of people, and that includes people from the poorer backgrounds. I think Mr. Breslin was incorrect to some extent to say that the poorer people or non-traditional backgrounds are pushed into places where they would earn less money. That's simply not true, because they could achieve a lot in the IT world. They could achieve a lot in the engineering if they just followed into apprenticeships and other vocational trainings. We should put more emphasis on that.
George, thank you, and thank you so much for joining me today. What a packed programme we've had for you. That's all I've got time for today. Back again, same time, same place tomorrow. Do join me again, but for now, let's have a look at what's going to go on with the weather.
Hello again. The winds are picking up once more today. For most of us, not going to cause too many issues, but we do have a yellow warning across parts of northeast England and southeast Scotland, where we're going to see some lively gusts, and another warning for snow. More on that in a moment. Going to turn colder everywhere as this cold front sweeps across the country, but it's only really across Scotland and Northern Ireland today. This little kink in the isobar suggesting here we could see some very strong winds for a time over northeast England and southeast Scotland. So we do have a Met Office yellow warning in place. There's that weather front bringing heavy rain for most of the day across parts of central Scotland and Northern Ireland, turning to snow across the northwest. For most of England and Wales, it's a dry, fine day. Some sunny spells and still pretty mild, but the winds are steadily increasing. And then, as we go through the evening, the rain will push southwards and we'll see more snow showers coming into western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Quite concerned about the amount of snow building up in some locations. It's going to be hit and miss, but then through the central belt, even into parts of southeast Scotland, we could easily see some snow building up through the night. The rain will work its way southwards, keeping the temperatures up here, but the colder air is arriving for many, and temperatures will be down close to or below freezing to start Thursday. More snow showers packing in through the day across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Another Met Office yellow warning in place here. Several centimetres building up, maybe as much as 20 or 30 over the hills in western Scotland. For England and Wales, we start with rain across the southeast. That clears away, it turns brighter with sunny spells, but even here some wintry showers likely over northern England and North Wales by the afternoon, and more windy weather coming into Northern Ireland during Thursday evening. More perhaps tending to rain at this stage at low levels, but still some snow coming in over the hills. That should all, though, clear out of the way by Friday, and Friday looks like starting cold and frosty, but then for many a calm and sunny day to come. Goodbye.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows. Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to